This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is Ashley Eckstein, Ahsoka Tano from Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee to discuss the 11th episode in Season 1 of Andor. This episode is called The Daughter of Ferrix. It's a powerful episode. You have to bring in two powerful guests. First, let's bring in, I think you may have heard of this guy. He is the co-creator of this little podcast here, the lead designer, and the man of 1,000... What are you? Not laughs, that's Tom. What are you? Man of 1,000 whats?
Smiles? I don't know.
Smiles. I was going to say smiles. Cory Clubb.
Hey. Well, I'm glad to be here. It's fun. I've been wanting to do this for a while. I know you've been pinging me and wanting
almost
to get me on
week.
This almost every week. And then we've had 11 weeks so far. So I had to jump on and talk about this episode for sure.
That's right. So that's a lot of handsome having Cory on. So you got to have someone else equally handsome.
Ooh.
He's also a returning guest. He has also been around Coffee with Kenobi for almost as long as Cory and I, almost. He is the Count. He's Count Jeff McGee of Star Wars Splash Page and everything Marvin Dog Media. Jeff, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me, Dan. Cory, good to talk to you again too. Man, I'm a little confused. This because this was apparently the season finale, according to Dan, and it seemed very anticlimactic.
I'm so glad that you brought that up. Because last episode I said it was the penultimate episode because I was so set that there were 11 episodes and I forgot there are 12. So now it's the penultimate episode because next week is the finale. I had texted Cory and Jeff before I realized there were 12 and I said, hey, come on next week. I want to talk about the finale. And I got it all messed up. The important thing is we're here. We're smiling. We're a lot happier than Cassian and everybody on Ferrix.
Yes.
That's for darn sure. So let's dive into the show, gentlemen. I do want to do a letter grade thing, but I'm going to save the letter grade for the end.
Okay.
And basically, I'm assuming all of our comments will lead up to how we sort of our rubric for how we get to our letter grade. So just give me one word to describe this episode for you and your overall thoughts on the episode. Who wants to go first?
I'll go. It's the same word a lot of people use to describe me: dense. And I mean that in a good way. There was so much going on. There were so many layers going on. I guess the one thing we didn't really have was a lot of laughs in this episode, but there were a lot of moments that literally took my breath away, and a couple of times that I really thought this is some of the best storytelling that we've gotten from the galaxy far, far away ever, full stop, in my opinion.
All right, love that. Cory, what about you? You got a word to describe the episode and overall
Word
thoughts
to describe the episode. Tipping point. I guess that's two words.
We'll pretend like it's a hyphen.
Okay, there you go. I like that. Yeah, this is an episode that I've been waiting for 10 episodes, I guess. This is the one where kind of everything's coming together in a sense. We've got to know a lot of these characters throughout these episodes, and like Jeff said, this is some of the best characterization, storytelling, pacing, slow burns. I'm glued to the screen every week, and it is a joy. And it's just so interesting to me because, this is a Star Wars that I would probably hesitate to introduce to new Star Wars fans who had never seen Star Wars before. And just because there's so much emotion going on, there's so much complexity. And this episode kind of brings it to, like I said, a tipping point to see the things where they fall where they may. And I cannot wait for next week and the episode to come to see what happens.
My word, thank you. Appreciate that. My word is morose, because morose, by definition, means more than sad. It's gloomy and depressed. There's a lot of sad. There's a lot of grief here with the death of Cassian's mother, Marva. There are many different people who react differently to it. There's certainly some very rough moments, some intense moments, particularly at the end. But I want to circle back on what you just said about being hesitant to introduce this to people, to Star Wars fans. I'm really interested in that concept, and I think it's a fair one that we should talk about. So I have a number of students, of course, as a high school teacher, and I teach all seniors. So they're mature enough for this series. And several of them are all in and they're asking me about it every week, but just as many are like, I've been waiting off on this one. I've been a little bit reluctant. I feel like even now, besides a starship and some ties and some white armor and things like that, I think you could make this just an espionage piece or like just a spy drama on a streaming service, and I would still watch it. I still think I would watch it. Star Wars to me is the gateway. It's the hook that pulls me in.
Sure.
But because it's so unique and so different from anything that's Star Wars related, it's very much like, I mean, you know, I said this on Pour-Over last week. Like The Dark Knight, for example, that is like another track above the norm, and it's another level of excellence. I don't think it's that high above, but I think it's on a different track that's almost simultaneous to it because it's much more adult. It's much more riveting. And I feel like it's hard to say this without it being a pejorative to other Star Wars, so I don't mean it this way at all, and I apologize if it comes across that way. But the writing on this is just different. It's just different. There it is. I mean, there have been a lot of great writers who've done a lot of great Star Wars stuff, but this writing, these themes, the overall tone of this thing, well, like I said, is morose, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I am completely glued to the series, but for very, very different reasons than I am to other Star Wars.
I think that's fair, Dan, and I think your take on the writing, I think, is spot on. They're taking more chances with the writing of this than they have with anything else we've gotten especially from Disney so far. Mm-hmm. You know, The Mandalorian was a risk, but all things considered, it's pretty typical Star Wars, and I mean that in a good way. Mm-hmm. So much so that I do know someone who that was the only Star Wars they were familiar with when they started watching it, and still love it.
Wow.
I don't know if you would have the same reaction from someone who was not familiar with Star Wars with this, because the Empire plays such that looms so large in the story that if you don't have any background on what the Empire means, it might not carry as much weight, but I do think it would still work. But, you know, everybody talked about the Shakespearean monologue that Luthen had last week. And we get more writing like that. I'm in the minority on that one. In that it was great, but I didn't respond to it as strongly as everybody else did. But this week was more of the same, but it seemed a little more grounded to me. I feel like we had less speechifying this week than we had last week. And I don't mind speechifying if it's well done, like it was last week. But this one, like you said, this one just feels different, and there are. The stakes here are human. The stakes here are ground level.
Mm-hmm. See, I said this on a live show a couple of days ago. I agree with you. I mean, I love that last speech with some very powerful lines, but it was the one time in this entire season where I felt like I was watching a soliloquy, which again is for Shakespeare characters when a character gives a monologue on stage to the audience, sharing their innermost thoughts and feelings, and nobody in the play hears it. In this one, Lonnie hears what Luthen is saying, but it's the only speech that doesn't sound like an actual, real human being would say, because it's just so heavy and introspective and in a little unorthodox. Beautiful, but very, very different. So I think that's what you're saying. I agree with that.
Oh, I am. And we had a similar speech in his shop with, I can't think of the two characters' names. I'm horrible with names, but the two female characters, Monmouth's cousin.
Clea is his partner.
Had a similar exchange there, but used less words. I always reference Amadeus, the play in the movie. Too many notes. I think last week we had too many notes. This week we had just enough notes on that. They had a similar exchange, and it just, to me, worked a lot better and felt like more like two human beings talking to one another.
Yeah.
Jeff, you call it human. It's humanizing. I think what the series does, it makes us feel like we're part of these worlds, whether it be the factions that are the people on the ground doing the daily jobs, or it's the Empire, doing their overseeing and their ranking and the torturing and whatnot. But like you mentioned, the Dark Knight being a little high above other superhero movies, if you will. It brings that crazy sci-fi superhero like thing down to our world, makes us believe like, oh, this could happen, or this could be something that be going on in our lives. We could have obviously this hardships and things, and it humanizes, like you said, and this whole series has done that, and that's what's so capturing for me as a fan to watch this series. And I noticed too that this episode is getting around to a lot of things that we haven't seen so far. We see all these characters have been captured, right? They're captured, giving up secrets, and they're captured in prisons. Well, this episode I felt like was a lot of escaping. I noticed a lot of characters. We have Andor and his friend are climbing the cliffs there, escaping. We see Luthen escape. We see even, if you want to be a little morbid, that his mother escapes this life, this horrible life she didn't want to be in. And, we see that play out. Some of these characters they're escaping in a way that's good, they want to be in those places. But I think it's going to come to a point where not so good here at the ending as we see the actions progress. But boy, was this a heavy episode, like you said, Jeff. Lots going on here.
Very, very heavy. And I think I just realized what's so unique about this series. It's not science fiction. It's not science fantasy. It's almost dystopian in a way. And that's unique for Star Wars, because Star Wars, again, is all about hope. The way they do it here is just, I don't know, maybe through a cynical lens. I don't know. We have to keep in mind, and I do want to, of course, we're going to talk about the specifics in this episode itself, is that the reason it's so heavy is because we are seeing full-on oppression. And we know what the Empire is capable of, or we thought we did. We've seen the movies. Star Wars Rebels did a wonderful job of really breaking that down. We've seen it. But here it's so different because there's no sexy Sith Lord with a red lightsaber, or some big bad, or some you know what I mean? Some sort of thing made to sell action figures. This is just like real people doing really bad things, and real people reacting to that in the different ways that they are. And right away, you mentioned the whole cliff thing. There's this great piece of dialogue between Cassian and what's the name of the guy he's escaping with?
Melish? Is it Melish? Something like that?
Yeah. What is
I have it written down. That's why I don't know how to say it. That's all.
Yeah. Melch. Isn't it Melch?
Melch? Okay.
Yeah. Is that sound right, Jeff? Count Jeff?
I just said I'm horrible with names. I can't even remember the name of. I can't even remember the name of Dollar Tree Kyle MacLachlan's mother's name.
Cyril.
Thank you, Cyril. See, you knew who I was talking about.
Yes, I did. That's good.
I just made the connection. That's pretty good.
That's good. No, the whole thing about, there's this really beautiful tie that I didn't really recognize the design of. And then as it flies away, Melch and Cassian just have this dialogue where they're like, I can't do this. I can't climb up. And Cassian just has this way about him that is so captivating and so intense. And he's just like, I heard you. Yep. He's like annoyed, but he's not annoyed. He's encouraging, but he's not encouraging. He's just there. And he supports them just with the gravitas of his personality. And eventually they climb up because Cassian is basically looking him in the face and saying, I'm not giving up on you. Quit being full of what. You're not giving up either. Knock off this charade. And then Cassian has his own charade, keeps saying, they're leaving. And finally, they do leave, and we get to the top. But then they end up trapped in this net. So I had to watch. I watched this episode twice. And the first time I didn't have captions on. Boy, that was a mistake.
I had to go back and turn captions on for this scene as well.
Yes, because I'm still not sure why those two aliens let him go.
Yeah, because
did they give them their ship? Did they give them that ship? That's what I was confused about.
No, they all flew together.
They flew together. So here's what I think happened. The fisherman characters captured him, realized that we're being water's being polluted or lane's being polluted. It's all because of the Empire.
That factory that they were on assembling, that prison.
Yeah, they knew that the fact that these guys are from the prison and they're escaping, and said, "Well, we're not for the Empire. We're against the Empire. We'll let you guys go. We'll come with us. We'll take you somewhere. So
That was
that's
certainly
what
what
I got from
happened,
that.
but I didn't really understand the logic in the conversation. It was broken English, and in this caption even say broken English. So I don't know. Did you get it, Jeff? Like, what was sort of the?
I felt like they were just toying with them, but I did not see the moment where they made the decision to let them go.
Yeah.
I did not see that decision. So that's the only scene in the show so far that I've really kind of been. I didn't really follow it. I'm hoping that it pays off later on at some point, but I don't know that it will. Really just felt like false tension to me.
Well, I think that the
It
idea
felt
is
real though.
well. I mean,
That
the aspect that I understood is you see further in this episode is there's people helping other people, right? So they're getting a break. They got caught, and they say, "Hey, we're gonna catch you free and give you a break." We see that through when they take out the mother's body, and the people are stopping their jobs, having some solace there, some respect. We also see other characters. Luthen goes to Saw for. He said, "I'm going to join. I'm going to join." There's the people coming together and helping each other out. This is something that everybody we realize. We don't see this in the early episodes, but we see it now here in the later episodes.
That's a good point, Corey. I'll buy that. Yeah.
Yes, I do. I like that too. So I want to talk about Cassian. I want to talk about Mon Mothma. I want to talk about B2, which I didn't think I would say.
Oh.
And then the Luthen is kind of the big exclamation point portion of the program. Let's talk really quickly about B2. I was intrigued by this because, like when I meet most new droids, I'm instantly skeptical. And part of it for me is because everyone's like, "Oh yeah, this is the greatest new droid." I'm just like, "Have you met R2D2?" I mean, let's not. I'm not a prisoner of the moment, and so I that stuff needs to be earned for me. But I feel like I saw something here that I don't know that I've ever authentically seen to this degree. Like this droid was. I mean, it's sort of presented like a puppy at times, but here it's more like almost like Marva's dear old friend. Like they're both a couple of
well, it's like a child, right?
older people. Well, I took it as like they're both these two older people living together, and not like in a relationship per se, but into like a deep friendship. And the droid just can't move on from its grief. And I expected it to be kind of mawkish, but it wasn't. It was actually really nice, really kind of really heartfelt. And the big guy that's Cassian's friend, I kept looking for his name. I still don't know what it is, but he's such a cool character, great accent. But he was like very patient, very loving, very kind, even to the point of staying the night there so that B2 could wait, because B2 was still waiting. So very much like a dog to a degree as well, waiting for his friend, his master, to come back home. Because deep down inside, I got the sense the droid knew that Marva was dead and not coming back. She was part of the wall. We could talk certainly about the symbolism of that too. But it's just, I really was impressed that they made me feel that a droid could feel on a really profound level of grief.
Well, and the fact that his name is B2 Emo, I made a joke about that being a dig at Star Wars fans who aren't pleased with anything, but it turns out it's because he is an emotional little droid. And it broke my heart. It really did.
Well, you're a huge dog lover. I mean, did it resonate to you sort of in that level too?
It resonated to me on several levels. We're recording this a week before Thanksgiving. Most people don't know I lost my mother on Thanksgiving several years ago, and so this hit on several levels, and that the B2's reaction to it all just sort of informed all of that. So it again, I probably had a stronger reaction to it than most people would under certain circumstances, but that doesn't change the fact that it was handled with remarkable sensitivity by the characters and by the writers as well. I thought, and it just kind of made me want to hug him.
Yeah. Corey, anything on that?
Yeah, no, I agree with what you said there, Jeff. It was handled in a way, and if you go back and look at the shots as they're taking the body out, you're not following along with the people doing that. You're kind of off. There's a far shot. There's an inside shot. you're part of the atmosphere. You're feeling you're part of these people, this community, and this is someone of recognition is passed, and you feel that emotion just drawn out, especially like you said from B2. And I didn't know I could feel emotion for a droid. This factor, we obviously have, R2 in A New Hope having a strong connection, to do mischievous things and go on adventures. That's kind of an opposite emotion, but to feel somber and sadness, and just the way, kudos to the craft makers, the prop makers, that this droid was. You could tell just the way it was lit up, the way it was responding to things. Just really well done. And I want to say that about the fishermen too. The practical effects on those guys were great.
Yes, agreed.
So much so. So again, pretty cool. I think we all had a similar reaction. Wow, I can't believe we actually could feel this for this droid. It was really cool, and it was handled very, very appropriately, so that the weight of that scene could really be felt for us. Because really, we experienced most of the grief through a droid, through an artificial construct of a fictional series that has real things going on. Pretty interesting. Something that is very painful, I think, in a very different way, is what's going on with Mon Mothma. We got the sense last week with Davo, that gangster who made his preposterous proposal suggestion, "Hey, I want to introduce my son to your daughter." She hates this guy. She thinks he's a thug. I'd never seen her rattled by anyone the way she was by Davo. And in this, we just start to see that she obviously has agreed to it. The daughter is going through some Chandrilan ceremony to prepare herself. And then when her cousin shows up, and she and Mon Mothma have that conversation, that's a pretty long scene. It's about 5 or 6 minutes long of just honesty. Genevieve O'Reilly is just so magnificent in this series, and it's again on full display here. Her, she's burning from the inside. It seems she can't stand what has happened, what she has done, but she has put herself in a corner where she's 400,000 credits behind, and if the Empire finds out and they're very much sniffing it out, not only will she be in danger, but this entire thing.
Yeah.
So now she can't separate it, and she may very well lose her daughter she didn't have a great relationship with to begin with. But the pain, the grief here is a very different kind of grief, but it's awful. And I feel like I have boys. I don't have a daughter, but it translates to this horrible thing. Cory, what do you think, man? I can tell you're going to say something.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to see her backstory on how she got into the position she's in, and she had to reach out and make deals that she wanted to make. And when the previous episode, when he brings up the fact, oh, I'd like to betroth my son to your daughter, she was like, no, I'm not doing that. Let's get out of here. Basically ushers him out the door. And for now, we see that she has no other choice but to do this. And you talked about Luthen's message last time. He gives everything. He's given everything. He's given up love and life and everything.
Inner peace. Yeah.
And now she's in that same position where she's given up everything. She's obviously in a marriage relationship herself that seems forced to some degree. And I want to say that she feels like she's seeing herself through her daughter's eyes. I'm putting her in a position that might make her out to be just like me. I'm unhappy. But I don't have no choice to do this. And so, to reflect on it as a dad and as a dad to two daughters, that's it turns my stomach just to think about it. That's like the ultimate price to some degree. It's such a hard choice to make, and we, you talk about making choices and stuff. We get this further on in the episode as well with Saw. And we'll look at that too. So, tough stuff.
That's what I think is another reason that this is such a powerful. In A New Hope, when you see the rebellion, it's like, a handful of pilots in a room with this debriefing, and you've got good, you've got evil, and then the mighty Death Star, and it's just so clear cut. And here, it's just like the rebellion it's muddy, it's dirty, it's deceptive, it's dishonest, it's it's sacrificial, and it also commits murder and betrays its own kind. And it's, it's more historical in nature to a degree. And I'm certainly no history expert, but it really, I mean, that's, I think, one of the challenges, and also why I'm drawn to this series, is that in a franchise that's been all about good versus evil, it's muddying things so much. I mean, it's still pretty clear who the good guys are, but it's just very difficult, because this is not a nice, clean yellow brick road to happiness. It's mud stained, blood stained. It's bad news.
It really makes you question if the ends do justify the means by which they're going through it. And it's interesting. This episode is sort of a thematic sequel to the episode that came before, because we ended the last episode with Luthen explaining what he's given up and what he's lost.
Yeah.
And this episode is almost full of the rest of the rebels explaining to other people what they've had to give up, what they are giving up, what they're about to give up, what they're losing. Even, Luthen even has another scene with Saw that you were alluding to, Dan, where they talk about, the person that he's willing to give up because it's going to allow them to do something else.
Yeah.
And it really does. It gives you an idea. A New Hope and the original trilogy, you're thinking, okay, the rebellion, they're going to win, and they do win. In this series, you're realizing this is the very beginning of that, and they don't know how it's going to end. So the risk is even greater for these people that are trying to fly under the radar and foment this rebellion, because you don't know, they don't know where it's going to go. So it really is, it's terrifying for you as a viewer to know the stakes that they're in and the dire straits that they're living in.
If you didn't know about A New Hope and this kid on Tatooine somewhere that's going to help, which again, it almost feels like a different universe, that Luke Skywalker would even exist in this world. But yeah, that's exactly right. The person you're talking about is Anto Krieger. That name has been bandied about throughout a lot of this series, especially recently, last couple episodes. And he is the one that the ISB has somehow gotten a lead on. Lonnie has told Luthen, they know that he's coming, and Luthen is like, well, we're just going to have to sacrifice him. I mean, that's basically what it is. So earlier he tried to recruit Saw. We've only seen Saw twice in this series so far. And he asked to have Saw support Anto Krieger, and Saw said no. But then now that they've come back, he's all fired up to do it. And Two Tubes even warns Luthen, he's in a mood. Saw's in a mood. He says, good to know. But then he says, no, I'm not going to do it. There's this great exchange. It's very, very tense. But Saw, I've never seen this before, but Saw Gerrera is, I'm not going to say subservient to Luthen, but he definitely is willing to be like a subordinate to him to a degree. And that's something Luthen is so complex. We throw the word complex character around a lot, but I don't think a lot of people really understand. Complex characters doesn't mean they've got a couple of foibles and a couple of things and decisions. Complex characters, you don't really know what they're going to do or what they're going to think, because sometimes they don't even know. But it's even more than chaos. It's like because the Joker's chaos. This guy is in chaos. He's got a very definitive code.
He's single-minded.
He's got a way of doing things. He's very single-minded. Yeah. But as you both said, like, it's, people are going to be sacrificed, and Luthen almost never shows a crack in an armor. I saw it there, but his relationship with Saw in this conversation, there's just a lot to digest here.
Yeah, you mentioned the meeting there with Saw, and like they go back and forth, and I don't know what's changed Saw's mind. The fact that maybe he could plunder the goodies afterwards.
I think that's exactly it.
Okay,
I think that's exactly
it.
The more I see Saw, the less I like him.
Well, that's the point, right? I mean,
he's one of my least favorite characters, but I still think he's got an interesting function.
But he's from a different mind, right? He's not single-minded. He's focused on his own agenda in the sense of, fight his own fight a different way. He wants to fight it his way on his terms. Like he said, I don't want any orders from being taken. I want to do it my way. And
but I think he is single-minded because he only thinks about himself, whereas Luthen is thinking about the entire galaxy and what he thinks is the best way. Whereas Saw, we know Saw will burn you down. Luthen he doesn't want to do that. He even tells Saw, I didn't want to put you in this position, and he means it. Saw, I don't think, would give that grace. But they're just they're such a weird foil for each other.
Yeah. And it's interesting that they're I guess they're more alike than I think as far as that goes. But yeah, they're willing to sacrifice to get the job done, maybe in different ways.
Yes.
And you can also see that Forrest Whitaker, he plays such a great character. He's kind of choosing that scenery, and the fact that like he could seem to get a little paranoid when he started looking around, like, okay, who is it? Who do you have on your
with me? Are you ISB?
But then we meet him further in Rogue One, where he is far gone. He just doesn't trust anybody. Like he is so far out bananas that he is just like, this is the way I am. And it's really cool to see the character come back and play a previous version of that, and then keep that string alive. And it just shows a great actor doing what they do best.
That is tough to do as an actor, to go back and go a few steps back from the last thing you played, and show us that progression. It's really it is a tightrope walk.
Tell me about your impressions of the Luthen Saw dynamic and how they're foils for each other.
Well, I think Luthen is the perfect foil for Saw, because he sees right through him. He saw, because he saw, no pun intended, saw immediately start saying, we're going to do this. I'm going to do this as long as my demands are met, and we get whatever we find. Like Cory said, he's just looking for what he can get to bolster his coffers. And I think Luthen sees right through that, and Luthen is able to remain calm in the face of his harangues, which is a good word for them.
Very.
And I think Luthen knows exactly who he is and knows exactly how to play him. He even tries to quote unquote out Two Tubes as the traitor, even though it's not the truth. He knows what's going to happen, and I think it's just a great yin and yang. And Luthen, I think, is the only one who could deal with him.
I have a question. Oh, go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
No, that was it. Go ahead.
When they pat Luthen down, is that a lightsaber?
No.
I mean, come on.
It's not.
You don't think
it was like a spyglass of some sort? It looked like a telescope to me.
So my thought is this: I'm just going on the theory of the fact that he has all these trinkets and treasures from years gone by.
He's got a Jedi Temple Guard mask in that.
Right? Did I say that's the connection there? So if he's got that, why not just carry around a little loose artifact that nobody really knows about?
I think if a lightsaber shows up in this thing, then you've lost everybody, because you've gone out of your way to set a tone where you haven't heard the word the Force, you haven't heard the word Jedi.
That's true. That's true.
And if also you've got a lightsaber, then it becomes science fantasy. Right now, it's all very realistic, bleak, and oppressive. Very Charles Dickinson.
It's interesting you say it that way, because we haven't seen too many like space battles. We get a quick little space battle in this one, and it does kind of like, remind you, this is Star Wars. But yeah, that's a good point. I guess I wouldn't want to spoil the fact that it's done such a good job telling a story in this way, and
I think it would take us out of it. Really would.
It might.
Yeah. The only lightsabers we're going to see in this series are the ones on each end of Luthen's ship at the end of this episode.
Well, so that scene, I love that scene.
It was so.
The escape. It was one of my favorite Star Wars maneuvers of all time. It was fantastic.
They were very Top Gun-ish. And we haven't seen really much like that in Star Wars. But there was a moment, and this is the penultimate episode. This time I'm actually right, finally. And I thought he was going to die, or he was going to be captured and die short after that. Yeah. And again, that's the beauty of this series. We don't know what's happening to these characters besides Cassian. And you don't see Luthen in Rogue One. You don't see Luthen in New Hope. You don't hear about him because he was just created for the series, but also because who knows where he is. He doesn't seem like someone who just quit and retire and go sit on the beach somewhere and hang out at a hardware store, go to McDonald's every morning with his friends and get an Egg McMuffin. I don't think that's going to happen. So that was an excellent build-up, that smug Imperial on an arrestor cruiser, a great-looking ship, disabling that
tractor beam.
The countermeasures, that tractor beam. A shout-out to David W. Collins for being the voice of that droid on that ship.
Oh, nice.
But that was a magnificent sequence. The little maneuver you were talking about, Jeff, with the two lasers go out and they do a flip, and he slices those ties in half and just zooms out. Boy, oh boy, was that spectacular.
I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. Yeah. The fact that it shows you that this guy's not only smart, but he's prepared. Mm-hmm. He's not going to get captured. He's going to go do whatever needs necessary to be done, and whether that be the most heroic thing or the most worst thing, he's gonna do it because he's that guy. He's gone full in.
Yeah, he was already headed that way, but this episode made Luthen honestly one of my favorite characters in all of Star Wars.
I agree.
I think he's one of the most interesting characters we've gotten, and his resolve and his calmness in this, and just taking care of business. I want more.
I think that's why I like him, and I've said since the first episode or second episode, he's my favorite character in the series by a landslide.
Oh, easily,
And I think I liked this sequence so much, not because he was so calm and cool, but because he wasn't. And for him there was panic. For him there was concern. And now is he going to think that someone ratted him out, that the Empire was on him? I mean, he doesn't know that the Empire is just doing kind of this like. Clown was trying to flex his imperial muscles and try to show that he was a tough guy. He doesn't know that. So the ramifications for that could be quite catastrophic. I honestly don't know. But the thing is, I like that he was scared, because if he's not a little bit scared, and again, it's reserved because Stellan Skarsgård is such a tremendous actor, but if he's not scared, then this isn't a moment of tension at the end of a really intense episode. They're all intense.
They're all intense, yeah, for sure.
But it's interesting. They obviously called it Andor because that's a character that everyone recognizes. But I did not expect it to be a true ensemble show, and that's what it is. Andor is a supporting character in the show that's named after him.
It's interesting that you say that, because all these characters I enjoy watching them on screen. From the villains to the heroes, and the people who are just learning the ropes and Star Wars. I almost like I can't.
No filler characters.
I can't remember the names, but I can remember the. I don't know. It's fascinating. Again, like I said, I'm glued to the screen. I can't wait to see what happens, and it's interesting. But like, they're also forgettable, if that makes sense. But I think that's the way it's meant to be. It's meant to be. You're not sure as a viewer who's good, who's bad, who's going to back up who's going to happen next, and I think that's the way it's crafted in a sense, so that you can feel on edge every single moment as it goes on. What's going to happen next? Are they going to fall in line? Are they going to break the code? They're going to break out? Are they going to, it's really interesting, and it's just really well done. And I think that's good. It's a good thing. I don't need a Luke Skywalker to swoop in and save the day.
No.
I like this. I like the way they've set this up.
The reason... To me, the reason it works is because every single storyline that we've seen throughout the series could support a series on its own.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
With every single one of these storylines, it's the same rule I have for any film that weaves in multiple storylines. Each storyline has to be interesting enough to be able to carry its own film. And each of these storylines we've got, I would watch a 6 to 8 episode miniseries about any of them.
Absolutely. And another thing I like about this, besides the space battle at the end, is that this series doesn't even really need special effects, because it's so character driven. Yeah. It's so character driven, and it's a strength of the series itself. And that, we're talking about Star Wars here. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
And that's the thing too, is it's setting the bar so much higher for other series to feel like, I compare it to other Star Wars series, obviously, but Mandalorian was great, but it's just it feels so much Star Wars, and Book of Boba Fett, and of course Kenobi obviously is just very much Star Wars, but this is just heads and shoulders above those as far as characterization and storytelling and just pace. And it's just, I find it so interesting. I'm glad that they take the chance to do this kind of stuff, this type of storytelling within the Star Wars universe.
Me too. Well, the end is when Cassian finds out about the death of his mother. He goes back to where he was hiding before, and all of his money, his supplies are still there. So all of his stuff from Aldhani is still very much intact. The way he handles his grief, and the way he says goodbye to Melch, assuming that is in fact his name, I found super cool, and it's kind of like macho, but very him. Like, for Cassian to show that kind of emotion and actually care about someone else, and just he has like that bond with him, but you can tell he's different now. Like all that stuff on that prison changed him. He's still angry. He still hates the Empire. He's still all these things, but I just feel like he's not reckless anymore. And he very much reckless before with his friends, with his family, with his life. But even him being cautious, running to that quad jumper, which is a nice little homage to The Force Awakens, that to me shows Cassian's going to be a little bit different now. And even the way he reacts to the news of his mother, which was very real sadness. But I don't know. I think this is going to get him more towards what he's like in Rogue One.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's definitely where we're heading. And that was a gut punch of an ending, and his reaction was perfect. It was very understated, and you saw everything that was happening behind his eyes, but he didn't telegraph any of it. Luna is just a tremendous actor. Everybody in the show, they're all tremendous actors.
So you're the actor here. You're the official actor of Coffee with Kenobi. Well, how do you do? Like, what do you notice about him throughout this performance? Not only in this episode, but just the series in general.
I think the thing that impresses me the most about him is, again, you can see where he's going with it. You can see this character growing into the character that we saw in Andor. But the way he carries himself, he's playing it. You still don't know where he's going to go. At the beginning of the show, you don't, he's not into the rebellion. We're watching him grow into this character who gives his life for the rebellion. And it is remarkable because he starts out sort of callow. There are moments where he's really sort of callow here. And again, I'm not a good enough actor to be able to explain what he's doing or his craft, his process behind it. But all I can tell you is I can see everything that's happening behind his eyes. He's not, and he makes it look easy. He's one of those actors, he's kind of like Ryan Gosling, where he just makes it look easy, and it makes me so mad because you believe everything he says.
Because it's not
series.
Easy.
It's not at all. And that's the thing is when you're doing it right, you're working the hardest you've ever worked in your life, but nobody can see you doing it. And again, just that scene where he found out that his mother died, he almost didn't react, but you saw everything going on behind his eyes, and you saw him doing all the calculations about what does this mean going forward, what does this mean for me, what do I need to do.
Yeah.
And we didn't really touch on it, Dan, you mentioned it, but I loved the concept of them putting his mother's ashes into a brick.
Yes.
And putting that brick into a wall. I love that.
Why? Tell me why. What do you think symbolic about that? Or
well, it's just very unique, and it seems very very appropriate for this community, this culture. Because they're very very blue collar, for lack of a better term, very workmanlike, and everything serves a purpose. And so this is, by your death, you can still serve a purpose. Your final act is serving a purpose to help build a wall, to help build a structure or a shelter for somebody else. I just think it's wonderful. I love it. I don't know if that's based on something we have in a culture here on Earth, but I love it. It made me smile.
It's symbolism to the nth degree for this series. Really, to me, it's, you said building a wall, building something that's going to be keeping something in or keeping something out, in the sense of rebellion, right? I mean, they're building something that's. I mean, I was thinking about too is like when they had the Empire come into that Ferrix town or whatever, and they're taking over the hotel, and they're taking over some of the things. They're watching everybody. It's like what we just realized in this episode is the fact that they're surrounded by people that have passed on into bricks, and like you don't realize how big they're the ones at the disadvantage, the Empire. In the fact that like you stepped into our trap in the sense of this being done, which obviously it's just symbolism, but what an interesting way to build that into the story. I mean, again, this ties back to the great writing and the fact that like you talk about a very small tradition this little community has, but how much of a piece of you said symbolization that goes into this whole series, and this is the fact that what it's meant to be. So it's so cool to see this much passion be put into the storytelling and just everything that goes into this show.
There's nothing more like primal and working class than like brick and mortar, like
Yeah.
building together, working with your hands. I mean, that's even
It's a
biblical,
foundation, right? It's like
Yeah.
a foundation. So it's very, very much the beginnings of something bigger.
Yeah, I mean, it's not Christian by a one comparison, but there's just again, there's something very biblical about working with your hands and becoming a foundation, becoming a temple of your own. So there she's united with others that have passed before her, creating their own. You just work. I think it says the ISP agent. Uh, she says, "What's next?" And the assistant says, "They look for a wall. They build a wall." So like they're building these structures, they're building this town, they're building their community. What's inside, wherever she's a part of, I don't know, but it's still part of the structure that is Ferrix. And I think they're also ensconced one another as a community and looking out for each other. And you see that with like that small little not funeral procession, but they're taking out Marva's body. Really great. There'll be essays written about this for a long time. I think it's time to give our letter grades. I think we've done a strong job explaining our rubrics, breaking this whole thing down. So Jeff, give us your letter grade and any last minute thoughts you have on this episode.
Oh, this is an A+ episode. This is the best one so far.
Oh, wow.
Like I said, some of the best Star Wars I've seen, period. Some of the best television I've seen in a long time. And as far as final thoughts, the only thing we haven't mentioned that I had in my notes is how rough did Bix look? When
yeah,
that to me is sort of
Like
the epitome of this
about.
show. That's the epitome. That's the epitome of this show. This is what these people are giving up. Is it's everything. And A+. The finale is going to have a hard time topping this. I'm sure that it can, but I cannot wait to see where this goes. And we still have another 12 episodes next year.
That's right. That's right. Cory, letter grade and last minute thoughts.
Yeah, it's an A+. It's got to be, because I was even thinking through like the grading, and I thought, okay, what would I grade the other episodes? And like, I can't help but say they're all A+. Like, how do I differentiate some of the other ones? Like, yeah, there's certain moments that are key and pivotal, and character breakouts, and cool scenes, and just development, and just story driven stuff. But like, to me, it's just like it's all so fluid. The whole thing is just coming together so nicely. And this episode really, like I said, it's a tipping point to what's going to happen at the finale. And we've had so much growth up to this point. We see them have all these characters have gone through trials and tribulations to get where they're going to be, and it's going to be chaos or craziness to this last episode. I do want to call it one more last thing we haven't talked about, but I'll write down in my notes here that I loved the who's on first act between Ciro and his lieutenant friend. Like I thought that was great. I mean, what a great way to to bring it in the perspective of like a Zoom call or a phone call, video chat, or something like of this today. Like, oh, I'm losing you. I'm going through a tunnel, or it's just I'm getting pieces, and you're trying to finish each other's sentences, and it was just really kind of fun
going on. Yeah,
that was great. I like that character a lot, and the fact that I've also seen the fact that like the show's called Andor, like you mentioned, Jeff, and we're following Andor's lead into the rebellion.
Barely in the episode.
Yeah. That and the fact that we see it's very much, I think, Ciro is on the other side of the pendulum. Yeah. The fact that he's coming up through the ranks of the Empire, he's being molded into what the Empire is. He's stringent. He doesn't stop till he gets what he wants, and that's just really interesting to see these two characters kind of intertwined. To see them grow in different ways completely, and I mean, almost kind of feel for both of them. You could see like, oh, I could see myself going this way or that way. And so that's really interesting to see and pluck those characters out of Star Wars and just follow them through this entire series.
Yeah, Cyril is fun. He's also very like kind of mousy. And just, he's got a very sort of weird toxic thing going on with his mother. So yeah, again, all these little strings that Tony Gilroy is pulling.
Yeah,
and we're just completely riveted to it. My grade is an A. The only reason it's not an A+ is because the last one was an A+ for me, and the escape from the prison was my favorite episode of the series so far. Who knows what the finale will bring, but that is it's a very heavy episode about grief. The Bix thing, like you mentioned, Jeff, We didn't really talk about that at all. I mean, it's horrible. It's horrific. It's like the lowest of the low. The treatment of the way you treat your prisoners says something about your culture, I think. And the Empire is. I don't know that I'll ever look at the Empire quite the same way again. When you're a kid, Darth Vader's cool and the Imperial Cog is cool and TIE fighters and blah blah. But now it just kind of feels like dirty to say the Empire's cool because we've seen what they do and how they treat people. So it's giving us these perspectives and these fresh insights into this world and making it more four-dimensional and I don't know. It's really something. It's just really amazing. Really is.
It really does put everything in stark relief. And I just want to say one last thing. If you are enjoying this and you're listening and you've never seen any of Tony Gilroy's other work, check out the film Michael Clayton. He wrote and directed that. It was my favorite film of 2007, George Clooney. And he also wrote a film called Nightcrawler with Jake Gyllenhaal, wrote and produced, which was a phenomenal film that came out in 2014. That's about if it bleeds, it leads. It's about news media and things like that. So he always takes a cynical view of things, and Star Wars is no different. But those are both two just phenomenal films that really show his work.
I'm really glad you brought that up. But well, gentlemen, another terrific trio here. I'm just the one that cleans up after you guys. You come in and make a mess of things and make everything just so smart. So thank you so much for teaching me and helping me to appreciate this show and these characters even more. And this is what people have come to expect from the two of you over the years of all of your podcasting and writing and all of your talented work. So thank you both for coming back on the show. Cory, please let everybody know where they can find you.
Sure, yeah. If you want to reach out to me and tell me your thoughts on the episode or the finale or what you're looking forward to, you can catch me online on Twitter at Cory Clubb. Check me out there and follow me. I'll be waiting to hear what you think.
Well, yeah, you'll be sitting by your keyboard going, just
patiently waiting. Yes, refreshing that page. Yes,
I love it. Count Jeff McGee, what about you, pal? Where can people find you and all of your many, many podcasts?
Well, they can find the podcast. You can find anywhere you look for podcasts. You can look up Talking Toys with Taylor and Jeff, the pilot episode, the Saturday Morning Supercast, and as Dan mentioned before, Star Wars Splash Page. Or you can just look up Marvin Dog Media and find 3 of the 4. You can also find me on Twitter at the Jeff McGee because my name is not unique enough like Cory's that I was able to grab at Jeff McGee. And would you believe Count Jeff was already taken on Twitter as well?
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. Huh. So my new goal is anytime a new social media whatever is announced, I have to go grab Count Jeff before anybody else does. But you can find me on Twitter at the Jeff McGee, THE, and then my name Jeff McGee, or at Marvin Dog Media. I'm on there both places. So thanks for having me on, Dan. This has been a lot of fun. Cory, it's good to talk to you again.
I agree. Yeah, fun time.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.